Everyone, it's your boy Matt here. I'm putting this as a disclaimer for the next video, which was heavily edited by the someone. That is not how I presented the information. This is not how I came across. I have this issue where I'll create content, and because we live in the spooky era, and my job has been to unfortunately deal with that spooky work. I end up with this situation where my content gets adjusted to try and fit a certain notion or a certain agenda, or I get for me to show me in a certain way. So keywords get changed, and anything can be changed. So there's this constant AI thing that we live in. Things get fucked with all the time. And it means that it's impossible for me to have any continuity in how I'm presented, and small changes can be made to adjust how I am perceived. And it's terrible and it's horrifying, and it's just the reality of what I have to deal with. So please enjoy the following video, which was a quick walk around parts of the War Memorial, which I did. This is not what I recorded. This is not how I sounded. I've spent a large amount of time editing this content, and this is not what I produced. There is no reality anymore. It's just whatever is created by the state. So have a good day, everyone. Hey everyone, it's your boy Matt here, coming to you from the Australian War Memorial. So today's video is a continuation of a video I shot yesterday. Those 2 minutes I said turned into a day, whatever. Today I'm talking to you about military culture and what sustains military culture and ideology. So I'm currently at the Australian War Memorial to explain how this religious building, because it is a religious building, influences the behaviour of members of the military, and how we can use this and how it functions to reliably produce certain behaviours in this population. Christianity has the 10 commandments, the military has its own commandments, and this is the place where some of those commandments are instilled. Not everything I say today is going to be particularly formal. Parts of it are going to be a little bit more ad lib. A large amount of what I'm trying to do today is communicate ideas, and not everything I do needs to be a formal briefing. Today's video is more for educational purposes, and this is not something which I am intentionally creating to send to any commanders or any people with authority in the military, although it does function as education for those people should they wish to engage with my content. So first thing that we need to notice is that building there is called the Mausoleum, okay? There's a bloke in there, it's called the Unknown Soldier. I'm pretty sure we ended up identifying him at one point, so we need to find some other dead cunt to put in there. But it's called the Mausoleum. It has a religious connotation. The architecture here, the aesthetic of what we have here, is conducive to religious architecture, okay? So there's the connotations through this aesthetic which get us to orientate ourselves into the ideological space, the space that we need to be able to engage with the ideology of military. So this process of grieving for the dead that we have in this area, because on these walls we have the names of all the people who died in various wars. People will come here, they will put a poppy in there as to honour their ancestor. And I need to express there's a difference between honouring your ancestor and grieving for them. Okay. Think of like a cliche movie. Okay, some warrior movie. It's like, I am going to fight this war to honour my ancestors. In a lot of cultures, there's this idea of ancestor worship. What that does is that it's meant to be, it functions as a way of transferring values between generations. So we look at these soldiers who died in these wars, and then we extrapolate from them various virtues. Now, in that mausoleum there, when I go in there in a minute, I'm going to show you some various, the various values which are meant to be instilled in the military in that building, okay? Because it was done strategically, it was done with some intent, It was done as a way of, at a time historically, so I'm not saying this is the best way of doing it, where we had all these terrible wars and we're trying to make sense of it, okay? So there's a mismatch of different things which happened here. The ideology of military is not designed, it is something which is clumped together over time. It has a very long history and it inherits its meaning. So this is one of the natures of having ideology and military. When you're having, it's not just the case that you can design an ideology free will, like as you please. A large amount of ideology comes from history and you can't change history. You can reinterpret it. I think there's danger in reinterpreting history by changing facts or these things, but the reanalysis of history as our culture changes and we can look back at it from a different light is appropriate, and doing that to reinterpret values and redefine them is entirely appropriate. So let's walk over there. I'm going to show you some interesting things as I do it. And remember, this is all a little bit ad lib. It does function as education, but it's not intended as a formal briefing. So here we have the undying flame. This is without a doubt my favorite part of the Australian War Memorial. I'll show you in a second, right? Because it highlights an important relationship. One of my favorite relationships, if you've listened to my content, which is the military-industrial complex. The eternal flame. I don't know if I'm going to get this in frame, so let's see. A gift to the nation from the Australian gas industry. It is so good to know that the Australian gas industry has a deep care for the military community and the dead and our dead ancestors. It is so good to know. I am so happy for their patriotism as they export large amounts of gas without paying royalties to the Australian people. I am so glad that they did this little performative gesture here. Have you heard of what I talk about in my friendship with the Australian Institute and my frustration with these corporate fuckers who keep stealing our resources and then have the gall to be like, hey guys, look at this. Like, we care for you. We are a patriotic people. We're part of your society. Fuck you. Alright. So, again, this is the mausoleum. Now, originally this building was sculpted by a guy who, I think he had some of his limbs blown off. I can't remember which war that was. I think it was World War II. I'm a little bit hazy with these things. It's been a minute. So here's the unknown soldier. I think we copied that from the Americans. And the idea here is that we have this religious aspect to it. So when we are engaged in religious experience, we are inheriting the meanings from our cultures. And this is sort of an inheritance from pagan tradition. So each one of these pillars represents a different element which, if taken from a person, will result in their death. Sorry, just give me a moment. I was asked to leave the mausoleum because it is meant to be a place for grieving for the unknown soldier. Grieving is an appropriate activity, and I do apologise for that. If there weren't people coming in, I would be very happy to shoot, but the lovely woman here has made a good point. Now, in the mausoleum, as a continuation of that pagan tradition, we have those things there. But I want to use those pillars to illustrate a point. There's a very famous psychologist called William James. William James and a friend of him came up with this theory about emotion. So the way emotion works is that we have a stimulus in the environment, we respond to that stimulus, and our process of language and the build-up of associative learning over time allows us to reinterpret experience through the words which come through our head as an emotion, and the way that emotion exists in itself is it can be a little bit different, okay? So the most famous example of this is, say, excitement versus anxiety. They are two different categories of experience, but they do exist, have very similar autonomic causes, okay? And the process of having this inheritance of the pagan ideology, where we have these four pillars, allows for this experience to take place. So when we go in there, you're actually having a spiritual experience because of the nature of this sort of religious, ideological connotation which has been passed down to us. The same way that the architecture here is reminiscent of a church, and we have these four pillars in there, reminiscent of a spiritual tradition. It's something through this process of built-up associative learning, which allows us to have these spiritual experiences as we in the process of ideology of military. Right. So I'm going to go do some walking. I'll just show you some of how this all works. Not so much works, just some of the cultural history here. And this is just for people overseas now. So this isn't a description of ideology at this point. This is just me showing something. So part of Australian culture, very famously, was our involvement in World War I. Australia and New Zealand have this very close relationship because we were both colonies of the British. So each year we have a day called Anzac Day. Anzac Day stands for Australian New Zealand Army Corps, because during World War I they sort of clumped us together and threw us overseas together, and because New Zealand is a relatively small population and Australia still had a small population, it made sense to clump us and throw us at the enemy. So Anzac Day, trying to remember, I'm pretty sure it's the day that we landed at Gallipoli, and Gallipoli was this famous complete blunder, right? And each year on Anzac Day we have a big song and dance about it, and it's when I say that, that's not a derogatory connotation. I just tend to speak like this, so please don't get offended immediately. Give me some slack. And through this process, we have from a behavioural perspective, we have a frequency of a tradition. So we have a frequency for reinforcement of these values and this ideology. It's like going to church on Sunday. It happens once a year. The same way that we have Easter, we have these religious holidays which allow the perpetuation of this tradition and remind everyone what the values and get people cooperating in the reimagining, the reinforcement of the values of, say, Christianity and the social stories of Christianity, such as Jesus dying on the cross for people's sins, the idea of original sin, that we are inherently disgusting and that we need a divine being on top who facilitates a hierarchy in our society, is reinforced, okay, through ceremonies such as Easter. And we do a similar thing here. So there's if you have a person who you know died and you put a poppy in here, that means on the wall here next to their name, what you are doing is you're going through a process of grief, okay? And this is a way of remembering the dead and putting in context. And this is what this building also functions to do. It does allow this function of grieving, and this was, in some ways, its original purpose. It functions very much as a hub of ideology, but if you're doing that and you know the person and you're grieving, this can be useful. If you're putting a poppy next to a person's name, so my mate Lee over here, right? If you're putting a poppy next to their name and they're your ancestor, you're engaging in a process of ancestor worship, and you're trying to interpret. You're going through a process potentially through this build-up of associative learning, and all the stuff which goes on here, and all the stuff which is associated with the ideology of military, and those things are being put into you. Okay? You are looking at your ancestor, and you are going from your ancestor, and you're going, and you are honouring their values and their contribution, and in a way, this helps instill those same values in you. And that's what Anzac Day does nationally. So in the ideology of nationalism, which is something that we find people who are heavily engaged in right-wing politics tend to lean towards, this is sort of, they tend to have this love for the military. They have this love for the military because of this religious connotation, and are engaged in this ancestor worship, these honouring of the values which were being passed down to them, and there's appreciation for these people allowed me to live the way I am living. I honour their values. I'm going to have to potentially do those same fucking things one day to be able to have what I have, and this is how this machine to society keeps functioning. This is a good thing, okay? When I talk about ideology and these experiences, I'm not saying it in a way which is intended to belittle these processes. These are very important human processes and they allow society to function. It's important to engage with these ideas with what Slavoj Žižek would describe as an ironic distance. This is where you are aware of the process. From an act perspective, we would say you're diffused from your cognition, and we would say you're able to analyze it, interpret it, and understand the processes which are taking place. But there is no reason why you should not enjoy your ideology, and there's no reason why you should not enjoy these experiences. Hey everyone, it's your boy Matt here again, and I'm now in the new part of the War Memorial. So continuing on with that discussion of how ideology is something which we, in the military context, is something which has a historical basis, and as people who live in the now, we have to reinterpret from the past. It's not something which is designed, it's something that we just have to kind of figure out. Well, it's not necessarily have to, but this is how it's played out, okay? So we look here and we look at what the people who have designed the War Memorial have tried to communicate. So I'm currently surrounded by a series of different words which are meant to describe individual values, which are meant to describe the things that we want to remember the people who have died for and be able to honour their contribution. Because that we are doing this retrospectively and it's not a designed ideology, the War Memorial has not been designed to impart ideology for the purposes of maintaining the military culture in both the Australian population and the military. It has been designed in its role as a religious building for mourning. It's been a very ad hoc ideology which has been sort of clumped together over time. It's not something which has been designed for the purpose of brainwashing members of the military so that they can achieve their strategic aims. There are aspects of it which would be useful if they did focus the War Memorial more on that kind of thing. I'll talk about that in a few moments. But I want to highlight this by how these different ideals here are just distillings of regular human behaviour, and we've just clumped that in with the military. Because guess what? People in the military are people, and they're a reflection of the population. So let me just show you the variety and the ad hoc nature of the analysis. And I'm not saying it's reflective of the people, but it's not reflective of a intentional, designed military ideology. So we've got loyalty, chivalry, patriotism, ancestry. Very good one. That seems to, I think there's some self-awareness here by the people at the War Memorial for how the ideology of military functions. Comradeship, because military is a collectivist culture. And this is a strange one, independence. Ooh. And that's something which is historically meant to have been a part of the Anzac legend. Australian troops were meant to have been less okay with authority. I think that was more of a historical thing, and I think that was more of a juxtaposition between us and the British, who come from a more hierarchical culture. Curiosity, devotion. Can you see how there's a massive variety of values that we've sort of chucked together there, and it's not a design culture, okay? It's something which is sort of spontaneously existed, and we kind of have to interpret it, okay? And that's why there's this mismatch of different values and there's no strategic direction for it. And that's a good thing. And that's how ideology functions. People who are, say, jihadists, when they're following an interpretation of Islam, are following a very specific, are not following an inaccurate version of Islam, they're following a narrowly defined version of Islam, right? The same, when we go from a religious text or an ideological instrument such as the War Memorial to us as those values are transferred, that process is not the same for everyone. It's the way that ideology is transferred is going to be based on the characteristics of that individual. And because of this, we have all this stuff which a person can involve themselves with a tool of ideology, and the result of that process is going to be different from individual to individual.